They like to be by themselves far more. They travel in their cars far more than the Germans do. We have fewer cars, but we use them more often. It's not just because of land use, it's because we think our neighbour smells. And we must change that attitude about each other because we're all the same. We must get rid of that attitude and feel that being in a bus, being on a tram, being on the railways is a good experience, as it is in other countries. But you can't build good transport systems without the houses being in the right place. You go to places in Germany, you go to places in Denmark, they've thought about transport in terms of urban environments for 30 to 40 years. It takes an enormous amount of planning to make the trains work. You have to build the towns in the right place, you have to build the roads in the right place and the cycle paths. We have this attitude, it has its good points, whereby we allow people to build virtually anywhere, and we allow buses to come and go by this month or next month, and we wonder why we don't have a coherent system. We live in a freer country than perhaps on the continent, but it's not so nice to live in. You know, you take the rough with the smooth. It depends which type of environment you want to live in. But the technical point I leave for someone else.
I'll pick up the hydrogen one. There's a brief comment I'd make about mass and personal transport. Is that I do feel that we've got the balance completely out of kilter. We've got far too many cars, most of them are parked, but I would like to make the point that we do treat them completely asymmetrically. And I remember Ben Elton many years ago saying, why is it that any money put into the road system is called an investment by the politicians, but anything into public transport is a subsidy? And that's a bit of a giveaway as to how unbalanced the approach is. But on the hydrogen front, it's a very fair point, and absolutely right to, I'm glad you've raised it, but, and you're right to compare it with electricity, because just like electricity, we can't dig it out of the ground. We can't dig electricity or hydrogen out of the ground. They are just energy carriers. So don't think of hydrogen as an alternative to petrol, which is a primary fuel that you can get from crude oil. Hydrogen at the moment predominantly is generated industrially from natural gas. And if we generate electricity from natural gas, which is coincidentally regarded as the most efficient way of getting electricity, it's about 45 to 55% efficient. If you get hydrogen from natural gas, it's about 75 to 80% efficient. So it's interesting, I think, the way that this question crops up continually in the media, but it isn't really raised about electricity. And I'm saying that hydrogen is more efficient than electricity to generate on that basis. But actually that isn't even really the right answer, because these things are compared in terms of the CO2 emissions. If CO2 is the main concern, which I think it should be, the CO2 emissions per kilojoule of energy. And that's the basis on which the Energy Savings Trust assess hydrogen, and they think that we shouldn't rush headlong and put too much money into developing hydrogen vehicles quickly, because we can just as easily pursue diesel vehicles, and they compare it in terms of the CO2 per kilojoule of energy. But actually what we're interested in is the CO2 per kilometre travelled. And my point is that with a fuel cell vehicle, you can actually travel 4 times as many kilometres for the same number of kilojoules. So an equation about the CO2 per kilojoule is actually very misleading indeed. And the vehicle that we're making, which we will be showing in June for the first time, it's an urban car similar to the Smart. And using the oil industry's figures, the Konkawi report, which is what the EU relies on generally for CO2 emissions of different fuels, our vehicle will actually be emitting about 30 grams of CO2 per kilometre at source in the whole extraction, transport, refinery and distribution of the hydrogen. If you go to the oil industry's calculations for wind-generated hydrogen, that would come down to 3 grams per kilometre. And so that is really a result of the efficiency of the vehicle in using the kilojoules of hydrogen that we put into the tank. And I think taking the whole system approach and looking at that is actually a much more, is what we really need to be doing, but it's not necessarily what we're doing. And there are some vested interests who are not terribly keen on becoming too clean about the real issues, I think.
And deliver, and I don't think we do have enough faith. Obviously, it's behavioural change as well, and modal shifts, and my Eco Rally supports. So we even teamed up with a hitchhiking company during our last event, as well as promoting bicycles and other modes. But the big nut to crack has always been in cars, and that's why it's different. We know we can power our buildings renewable if we care to, but it's taking that bit of energy and put it on 4 wheels and travelling around with it. So behavioural change, but faith in technology and more of it.
Thank you.
My final point, I guess, is quite simple, and probably I reiterated it earlier. I mean, we all know that we're in a tough time at the moment. I don't want to say the dreaded word that begins with a C and then the next word ends with a C, but we're all feeling the pinch a little bit. But as you go about and really bringing the focus to journeys, etc., just really think about what you are doing and what you can do. And by all means, if it is that time to be buying a new car or a new scooter, etc., just consider the new options that weren't there last time you looked. Because as we've all kind of stated here, the industry is moving very, very quickly. Stimulus, grants, etc., they will come over time. I certainly wouldn't hang around for them, because we all know that the government has a horrible tendency to change its mind. But I would just make it very clear that you should go out there and educate yourselves, because a lot of people just think, being green is just being a bit of a hippie, etc. It's not that case. We all know it's not now. It's affecting our wallets. It's affecting our livelihood. So just go out there, educate yourselves on all the things that affect your life, and then just start making some big decisions.
Thank you.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I would start from before you start travelling. Choosing where you live is fundamentally important. I personally live within 20 metres of the town centre of the town I live in. I'm very fortunate in living within about 200 metres from the Green Belt. I'm privileged in that way, I suppose. But it means that my children walk to school, my wife walks to work, and I walk to work. We walk to the shops. We very rarely have to cycle anywhere. I came up by train today. That really reduces the impact. I don't even have to consider going in a car for very few journeys. It's such a limiting thing. So by containing my where I live and what I do and where I go, it means that I've reduced enormous impact. My impact, apparently, my carbon footprint is embarrassingly low for someone who lives in this country. And it's only high because I have to take the dead loss of everybody else in my carbon footprint, if you see what I mean. But once you do travel, I couldn't agree more. It's the vehicle you choose for each journey. It's how you bundle the journeys. A lot of people love the serendipitousness, excuse me, I'll say that again, the randomness of their journeys. They love the way they can just pop out to see Fred on Monday, go shopping somewhere else on Tuesday, and they don't plan how they travel. It's called travel blending, and we can save 25%, a quarter of our footprint, purely by travelling more carefully and making sure we combine journeys one on the other. I'm amazed at the number of people that take their children to school by car who live closer to the school than our family. I can't understand why they do it. Some of them actually take longer to get there and back than the walk. It's an attitude, it's behaviour. But the thing is, their kids are more disruptive at school because they haven't had the walk. They're finding their kids don't learn so much. All these things wrap into each other. So I would say, if you can be vegetarian, I'm not, but if you can be vegetarian, read a book, talk to friends, have a nice drink. The idea about what car you buy and how fast you drive it doesn't really matter much, because once you've got those sorted out, you could have a Rolls Royce outside and it would have very little impact on the environment because you'd never get in it. That's
Excellent. Thank you very much.
They are excellent points, and I have to echo those. Really, it's a case of choosing the correct transport for the journey. And is that correct transport your feet? Is it your bicycle? Is it your motorcycle? Is it your car? Is it your lorry? I really do wish I could sit at home and read a book. I'd love that at the moment, but I'm designing and building a motorcycle in 6 months, and I can't do that. I've travelled far too many miles over the last 2 days, in fact, getting motorcycles to here, motorcycles to test. And I couldn't do it in a car because I couldn't get the bikes in. I had to do it in a van. But all those miles I was travelling about, I was looking into some cars I was passing, and there's one person in each of these cars.